What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Nick 4K video. Today we're checking out a video from Braden Alberti, and the video is titled "The MCU has failed its female characters." Now, there are a lot of different issues with the MCU, especially in the last couple years here after Endgame, and this is one of those situations where it's like, let's call it out, let's take care of it, and let's move on. So today we're going to be checking out what Braden has to say about it. I'll be giving my thoughts, and hopefully he can give us a little bit of a deep dive to the whole situation and possibly give some ideas to Disney so they don't do it again in the future. But with that said, guys, if you enjoy this video, make sure to like, subscribe, turn notifications for more. And with that said, let's jump in.
The MCU is a hot phrase to throw around these days. It refers to the current state of Marvel films and its ever-growing cast of lackluster female characters. There are plenty of other videos that already point out this issue, but I would like to try and break it down with a more productive spin. We're going to go character by character to point out what went wrong and talk about what could have been, because Marvel's comics already have a well-established and very large roster of prominent female characters that, for one reason or another, didn't translate to the big screen adaptations very well. So let's figure out why. The first of many to cover will be Pepper Potts. Pepper started out as a traditional will they won't they love interest that steadily developed into Tony Stark's life partner, who he would go on to marry and have a child with. That's all well and good, though there are three particular hiccups that arose along the way. The first being Iron Man 3. That whole movie was a dumpster fire, and Pepper's role within it was no exception. Mainly the scene in the finale where she effortlessly defeats the man that calls himself the Mandarin. She then goes, "Oh, whoopsie daisy, that happened."
That was really violent.
And it's like, excuse me, this was advertised as an Iron Man film, not celebrity yoga. Don't get me wrong, seeing Pepper do some cool stuff with temporary powers is neat, but this is a bridge too far. She just Jar Jar Binks'd her way into beating the main villain, Iron Man's arch nemesis, while the titular hero just sits there and watches. Before this moment, Pepper was just a secretary that worked for a wild boss, and struggled to put up with his hijinks. Seeing her jump from that to this is such a leap that it makes this film's plot feel much less important than it should, and all it serves to do is make an already bogus villain even more of a clown. Her second hiccup is due to her absence.
Okay, I actually don't mind that. I think that while it wasn't exactly set up to happen, I do think it's one of those things where Pepper is known as being more of like a, I wouldn't say a action hero, right? But one of those more, she's sassy, right? She's a sassy character. We've seen that with Tony. She's actually able to match Tony's sass, which is funny. I like that. So was it kind of out of nowhere? Sure. But I think it's one of those things where I'm okay with it because it wasn't like it was a message being beat over my head type of thing. Her doing that didn't say like, hey, girls are better than men. You know, it didn't send any messages like that. It was just very much like a, hey, here's this character. She has this cool moment. It is what it is. I can understand the argument for why you would say it is part of the MCU movement, but personally, I don't see it. Not this scene anyways. There are plenty of other ones I'm sure he's going to get to in this video. But based off of that scene in particular, I don't think that counts as MCU. But like I said, I would understand the argument.
In the various sequels with little to no explanation as to why. We see her in 2013's Iron Man 3, then she just vanishes until 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, where she's basically reduced to a glorified cameo. All we get between this gap are singular lines of dialogue about how she and Tony are having problems.
We're taking a break. It's nobody's fault.
Now, granted, I'm not saying she should show up in every single film. She is only a secondary character after all, but this is important to bring up, because during her absent period, it was difficult to tell if we were even meant to still care about this person, or if she was just being quietly written out of the story. This is a problem that will come up a lot with these characters.
Oh, you know, Jane and I aren't even dating anymore.
One film, Tony and Pepper are closer than ever. Then the next film makes it unclear if we'll ever see Pepper again. Then all of a sudden she's back and they're getting married. It's a bit of a mess that loses a lot of potential by taking these breaks. And these long-running storylines become hard to follow when they feel like they're being dropped and revived on a whim. By bringing this up, the hope would be that Marvel would learn from these kinds of mistakes by planning out entire arcs for these characters well in advance before putting them on screen. If you want a massive long-running franchise, then that will require extensive amounts of pre-production in order to keep the quality consistent. Pepper's role in Avengers 1 is a great example of how to do it the right way. She gets a lengthy opening scene to establish her current status in the world, then she gets lightly referenced throughout to remind us who Iron Man is fighting for. Her role is small, but it is still very important. The third hiccup is rescue. This is going to be another reoccurring problem with a lot of these characters.
Okay, so my thoughts on the second part of that, of Pepper Potts. I just think that's one of those things where they didn't know if they were going to get her back. I just think they were like, hey, she's still around, but, you know, this is why she's not here. I don't know if that's necessarily an issue for the character herself. It's kind of just more of like an issue of behind the scenes. But I could see the argument for why someone would say that hurts her a little bit. It does kind of make her look more shallow, I guess you could say, from a certain point of view. But it's one of those things where, like, Gwyneth Paltrow, she's super busy. And for her to come do this stuff is pretty... I wouldn't say it's pretty cool for her because she gets paid to do it, right? But it's one of those things where it's like, she's still doing something. She's still part of the world. And I'm glad that she came back, because I remember around that time, I did think they were going to write her out. But when she came back, I was like, okay, cool. They found a spot for her, and she seems to actually want to kind of be part of it, even though she doesn't even know what movie she's part of. She just comes and does it, and then she leaves. But, you know, I like Pepper. I think she does a really good job. I think she is one of those, like, strong female leads who didn't necessarily need to be strong, right? She had a really good character. She was written right, especially in the first Iron Man. And Iron Man 2, I think she's written pretty good too. And even Iron Man 3 was written pretty all right. I don't think I have an issue with the way that Pepper Potts' character is even written at all. So I think while there are a lot of female characters to complain about in the MCU, I don't know. I can't complain about Pepper. I think she's done pretty good for what we see from her. Like I said, when she's written out of certain scenes or out of certain movies, it is what it is. But as far as her character goes, from what we've seen, I think she's pretty solid. I'm gonna have to say that I don't think she's a very flawed character.
Third hiccup is rescue. This is going to be another reoccurring problem with a lot of these characters. Marvel Comics began a downward spiral in terms of quality during the 2010s, and one contributing catalyst to this collapse was the idea to give every love interest sudden and lazy superpowers. This was a dumb idea for a multitude of reasons, mainly that doing this diminishes the importance of the hero, and often misses the point as to why the hero even has their powers in the first place. Pepper does the former by becoming rescue, and deflating the value of the Iron Man suit. Iron Man isn't special if there are many other equally capable Iron people. And some of you may wonder, well, what about Rhodey? By that logic, wouldn't he contribute to the problem as well? And yes, you would be correct. He is part of the problem. However, this problem is very small when it's only two. The more you add, the harder it gets to justify. And War Machine was always presented as Iron Man's sidekick, having many story elements put in place to establish why he should be there. When Pepper puts on the suit, especially in the movies, it's incredibly sudden with no reasonable justification. She goes from secretary turned CEO mother, who threatens to leave Tony anytime danger even remotely approaches his vicinity, to now all of a sudden sharing 360 no-scopes, and killing scores of aliens on the front lines like it's no big deal. It really gives the impression that any schlub off the street could just grab a suit and save the day, because wearing the suit apparently just puts you in easy mode. The only saving grace from Iron Man 3 is that it established that Tony Stark was a hero beyond the suit, and that he could not be replaced. And Pepper's involvement just throws that whole idea in the trash. Pepper being utilized like this rapidly diminishes the stakes of this story, and tells the audience that there isn't really any danger in this battle at all. Anyone who is capable of most bodily functions can just show up to tell jokes and have fun. The simple solution to fixing this problem would be to not do it. And that goes for pretty much every character that gets this treatment. Pepper doesn't need superpowers in order to be a fascinating character. Being a normal human that gets wrapped up in this wild world is already inherently interesting on its own. Furthermore, it's good to have normal people around to keep the hero stories grounded and relatable. When everyone gets to have powers, the world itself feels more cartoon-like, to the point where anyone without powers seems abnormal.
Okay, we'll talk about that scene, I'm sure.
Plus, it's a simple and easy way to give the hero something to fight for. I know we like to boo the damsel in distress trope, but honestly, it's a trope because it's effective, and there's nothing wrong with it so long as it doesn't get repetitive and lazy.
Okay, so, I'm sure he'll go a little deeper into this as well, but I understand his argument, I just disagree. At this point in the MCU, it has been established that there are bigger threats out there, and so if I was Tony, I would make sure that, like, my wife had her own impenetrable Iron Man suit type of thing, you know, and I'd make sure she knows how to use it as well. So I see it like this. I didn't see it as though she just got a random power up. I saw it as though in that 5 years of Thanos snapping everyone away, she prepared. Like, she didn't just like sit back and be like businesswoman, you know, she was ready for battle. So I actually like that element to her. I mean, it does, like I said, it feels like it is a little out of whack, right? It doesn't feel like it fits 100%, but it does work when you think about it from that perspective. Like the idea that, hey, here is this massive universe-ending threat They solved it, but they didn't really fix it, right? So it's one of those things where they're ready for the next one, and she's gonna be ready this time. I'm okay with it, but like I said, I understand his argument. But that's my thoughts on that.
Moving on from Pepper, we have Betty Ross. Where is she? She only gets one decent film before vanishing completely. Why? She is a pivotal character to the Hulk story, and they just throw her in the trash and replace her with Black Widow of all people.
It's false. No way. It never happened.
The Hulk's story is an inherent tragedy. He never gets to live happily ever after like all the other heroes, and that's a major reason as to why his story is so fascinating. A big contributor to that tragedy is his love story, in that he and Betty openly love each other, but can never truly be together because the Hulk is far too dangerous, and Betty's father is the Hulk's most persistent villain. It should go without saying, but by removing Betty from the equation, the entire Hulk storyline gets severely diminished and loses a piece of its soul. Black Widow is in no way a suitable replacement, because she has nothing to do with the Hulk, and both of their stories are better suited to go in other directions. And while we're on the topic of Black Widow, there's a lot to say about this one.
Okay, so for Betty, I just think that's one of those things where there's a bunch of stuff that happened with the Incredible Hulk. Like, the Incredible Hulk movie wasn't even like a Disney movie. It's Universal, but it got brought in to the MCU, but it's not actually part of the MCU, but it also is. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is like, you can watch it, like we'll consider it one, but we're also like, you don't have to watch it type of thing. So that all got messed up. I'm sure if Incredible Hulk was actually underneath the MCU banner to the point where like they could make their own standalone movies, Betty would have continued on and we would have saw more with her. As far as like making her like a She-Hulk, I'm so glad they didn't do that, and I really hope they don't do that. I know that the actress, she's coming back for Captain America Brave New World, coming out in a few months, so I'm really hoping that she doesn't turn into like a She-Hulk as well. Kind of hoping they let that go. This is one situation where I effectively 100% agree with you. I do not want Betty Ross turning into a Hulk. That's not her character arc. She's not supposed to do that. Don't do that. Please don't do that, Marvel. That would be so bad. I'm okay with Ross turning into the Red Hulk. I think that's fine. You know, that's well established, and one of those things where like I can see that happening, where Betty Ross turning into a Hulk, I just hope does not happen. But as far as the character goes, she served her purpose. She served her purpose for the movie. She was the love interest that she could never actually be with him. You know, from a certain perspective, you could say it's a Romeo and Juliet situation, but also not really at all. If you take out the family parts of Romeo and Juliet and just do like, hey, you guys will be forever scorned lovers, I guess you could say that. But when it comes down to it, she served her purpose well, and I think that future movies, or at least like maybe more like, if she would have showed up more, they would have been able to do more with her. But as far as, you know, what she did in that one movie, I think she did a good job. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of a rebuttal there. But like I said, I do understand Braden's arguments.
Many people out there, even the most harsh MCU critics, tend to agree that Black Widow was one of the best handled female heroes in these films. I do not agree. Don't get me wrong, she is one of the best of the bunch, but that isn't a high bar to clear. To put it short, she doesn't live up to her potential, and the character we see does not line up with the background she is said to have. We are told many times over that Black Widow spent her youth being tortured, mutilated, and brainwashed into being a ruthless, cold-blooded Russian spy who committed many heinous acts and would have continued to do so were she not brought back from the brink of damnation by Hawkeye and later recruited into S.H.I.E.L.D. That is who we are told she is, but what do we see in practice?
Was that your first kiss since 1945?
We need you to come in.
Are you kidding? I'm working.
We're still friends, right?
Depends on how hard you hit me.
Oh, wait, what about that girl from accounting? Laura?
Lillian. Lip piercing, right?
Yeah, she's cute.
Yeah, I'm not ready for that.
An unusually well-adjusted fun aunt who loves to quip and put her feet on the dash. If it weren't for her opening scene in the Avengers, you would barely be able to tell she had a Russian background at all. Any actual espionage she performs is incredibly limited, with her most often just filling the role of thigh grappler with guns. What the MCU presents is good enough to be entertaining, and people aren't inherently wrong for enjoying this portrayal. However, if they had taken advantage of what they set up for this character, and fully utilized the stories they inherited from the comics, then Black Widow's story could have gone from great to groundbreaking. Here's what I mean. For one, let's get a genuine Russian accent, please. With how big Marvel is, that shouldn't be a big demand. Then change her personality to be incredibly cold and strictly professional, with the exception being when she plays a character while conducting spy business. Have Hawkeye be the only one she even slightly opens up to, since he helped her turn her life around, and give her an arc where she learns to be more open and trusting with the other Avengers. Have her start out these films by being very mysterious, hard to read, hard to connect with. That would do wonders in terms of having her develop long term. And as far as combat goes, she should not be having her time wasted on fighting basic enemies on the front lines, alongside everyone else. We can do better. Espionage and infiltration should be this character's top priority. Her playing the victim in order to trick Loki into spilling his plans is a perfect example of what to lean into. Now take that a step further. For example, during the Winter Soldier film, instead of having her quipping with Cap and setting him up on dates, have her reveal herself early on as a member of Hydra. That would be a completely mind-blowing moment and a huge twist for both Captain America and the audience. You could intertwine her with Crossbone's story and place her in command of this new corrupted shield. But then, towards the end of the film, reveal that her allegiance to Hydra was only a ruse that she pulled for the purpose of assassinating Adrian Pierce, and by doing this, establish that she is so good at being a spy that neither good nor evil factions can tell where her loyalty truly lies, with limited exceptions such as Nick Fury. In Age of Ultron, instead of just having her punch robots, have her infiltrate Ultron's base of operations, disrupt his assembly lines, hack into his drones, amongst other things. Be more creative with how a super spy can save the day, and with that stupid Bruce Banner romance, please nuke that completely. Bruce loves Betty. That's it. However, with that said, the idea of Black Widow playing a nurturing character in order to try and trick and control the Hulk could very much make for compelling drama if done right. Though you would need to distinguish Bruce and the Hulk as separate characters first. Bruce loves Betty, but the Hulk is alone and vulnerable in that regard. Then have the payoff of this be that the Hulk eventually learns the truth about Black Widow, in that Black Widow was just manipulating his feelings in order to make him a more cooperative Avenger. In discovering this betrayal, he would leave the Avengers on bitter terms, instead of leaving for no reason. Plus, this could be used as a hypothetical arc for Black Widow, in that she would feel guilty for causing such a betrayal, and she would reflect on what lines she would be willing to cross in order to see her missions through. I could go on with other Black Widow films, but I think you get the point. This is a character that should be much more complicated to say the least. Make her borderline villainous at times. Get creative with how she contributes to the team. Having the ultimate super spy on the roster should be a gateway to endlessly unique and exciting interactions that no other character could provide. Also, one last note, if you're going to hook her up with anybody in the MCU, why not make it the other top tier assassin who could greatly relate to her trauma of being brainwashed by the Russians, as he went down a similar path himself. Similar skills, similar background, similar aesthetic. This should be an easy layup. Moving on from Black Widow, we ought to talk about Jane.
Okay, so it's really hard to really say anything bad about Black Widow. I actually think she's a really solid character. I understand a lot of the arguments he made there. I think one of those things that really hurts Black Widow is that she deserved a standalone movie a long time ago, way before the Black Widow movie, and she deserved a better movie than the Black Widow movie. So, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. I think maybe a more grounded Black Widow movie back like after Civil War would have been really good, but that's just my opinion.
Jane Foster and the Asgardians. We've gone over these characters in great detail in the past, so I won't want to repeat myself too much here, but I would like to make a point about the roles these characters play in these stories. The way I see it, before all the multiversal copy and paste characters, classic Marvel characters used to all fit together in one big story like small pieces to a large puzzle. For the most part, they would each bring something unique to the table that no other character could provide, and that is what would make them special. It would be so fascinating to watch all these vastly different characters come together for these big stories. The reason this is relevant to someone like Jane Foster is because Jane is unique in how normal she is. There aren't many Marvel characters that are simply just nurses, with no more quirks or special attributes, even when compared to other love interests, who usually have much more exciting jobs or missions. So ironically, in being average, Jane actually stands out quite a bit in a world full of fantastical and powerful figures. The irony gets stretched even further when this most normal character gets involved with the most mythical character, and there is a lot that a writer can do when playing with a concept like this. However, the modern regime within Marvel seems to have lost sight of what makes Jane Foster's piece of the puzzle so valuable. So instead of allowing her to sit in her rightful place within the great Marvel puzzle, the MCU higher-ups saw fit to make Jane yet another of the many dozens of Marvel super geniuses cramming her piece into a corner of the puzzle that is already way overcrowded. As a result, Jane comes off as much less memorable, with many of her scenes involving her spouting the same fake science mumbo-jumbo that we have already heard many times before, and therefore making Thor's early films even more forgettable than they already were. If she wasn't played by Natalie Portman, nobody would even remember that she existed at all. But that wasn't enough for the MCU. She was in fact still too original, so they had to copy and paste Thor right over top of her. It is a completely unnecessary move that dilutes both her and Thor's originality, as well as cheapening what little stakes and investment were left in this franchise at this point. I would also say that it takes her character's journey off the rails, only she never really had a journey. In the beginning, she had a budding romance with Thor, then she became acclimated to Asgardian culture, then she completely vanished for nearly 10 years, only popping up when Thor feels the need to remind us that she is done and gone in his story, until of course when the writers decide that she isn't done and gone, and they wheel her back out so that she can take Thor's hammer for one film then die. It was painfully obvious that there was no plan for her character, especially when Natalie Portman took a break from the franchise, and that is disappointing. The people in charge could have planned out her journey alongside Thor years upon years in advance, with plenty of source material to pull from to guarantee success. But instead of doing that, they just wrote her story on the fly, and allowed behind-the-scenes actor drama to leak into the films, and create a heavily disjointed love story for one of their big four heroes. It can't be that difficult to plan these movies out before producing them. If anything, that should make this job much easier, but apparently Marvel just doesn't like to write their movies at all. If the actress in question doesn't want to do the job anymore, then replace her. You would be surprised just how unnecessary she is.
So my perspective on that is, I like Jane. He's right. She is very plain Jane, I guess you could say. She's a very plain character named Jane, and she works well like that. But I'll be honest, I actually did like when she became Thor, or she became like a Thor-powered being, I guess you could say. I'm okay with that. I actually think that's a pretty interesting idea. You know, she's dying from cancer. She grabs the hammer and it gives her like extra powers. I think that the way she found out about it and she got it was a little convoluted. And of course, you know, the rest of Love and Thunder was pretty rough. But it's one of those things where, like, when I look back at Love and Thunder, it was pretty bad, right? But one of the things I don't think about that was bad was Natalie Portman as Thor. I liked that idea of the storyline, especially before when she was having cancer in the beginning of the movie. The movie starts out really serious, and then it just gets really bad as time goes on. But like, I feel like if the movie had more of that type of like tension to it, I don't know, it could have been really good. I don't really think I can complain about Jane. I kind of dug her. I like the fact that like she's more like of a quiet, plain character, and then when she gets the hammer, she becomes more cocky. She becomes more like living, if that makes sense. Like, her mortal self is dying, and while her mortal self is getting, you know, weaker and weaker and slowly dying, and she will eventually die, this more Asgardian side of her is becoming more alive, and she is growing and becoming stronger. So I do kind of like that duality between the two characters of Jane. Once again, I understand his arguments with it, and he's not wrong, but I do think there's an element there that was actually pretty good. It's just the movie itself was bad, and therefore the Jane Thor character also is perceived as bad as well. So I don't know. Like I said, just my opinion.
Though if you would prefer to have an in-universe reason for not having her there, you could shift Thor's love story over to focus on Lady Sif instead. Do any of you out there remember Lady Sif? She had the most minor of roles in the first two Thor films, before also dropping off the map and being reduced to mild cameos until she was able to return in Love and Thunder for one single excruciatingly lame joke about the technicalities of going to Valhalla.
Oh, I hate to break it to you, but for a warrior to get into Valhalla, you have to die in the battle. You survived.
Oh, shit.
She is originally meant to be one of the strongest warriors in Asgard, and creates a love triangle of sorts with Thor, being his main Asgardian love interest. And she's often a major player when Asgard gets involved with major storylines. So the MCU had this, quote, strong female character who they opted to stuff into the background and do nothing with, even while there was a long vacancy in Thor's love life. That would have been the perfect time to boost her into the main character spotlight. But no, she was banished to the Shadow Realm in favor of having Natalie return as a one-off Thor in one of the worst MCU films to date. It is a complete disaster of a story arc. They would have been better off not including Lady Sif at all, though that sentiment could be shared with a lot of characters in this franchise, another of which would be Valkyrie.
Okay, so before we get to Valkyrie, I know that this one's a pretty big point of contention for people, but I really think they underutilized Sif. I 100% agree with him with that. Sif could be a really solid character, and that was the idea, was like Jane was kind of Laura's first love, and with Ragnarok kind of splitting that apart, that was the end of it from a certain perspective, right? Like that's just the end of that relationship, and now he could shift more to Sif. But Ragnarok also didn't have Sif in it at all and didn't tell us where she was, right? So it was always perceived that maybe she died there as well. With the other members of Thor's crew, they just kill out of nowhere in that movie. But then she showed back up. So it was cool to see her. She loses an arm. And I do think they could potentially do something cool with Sif in the future. I do hope that this next Thor movie, Thor 5, has more of a focus on it. Based off of current rumors, what I've been seeing anyways online, is the next movie is going to be like a Thor, Hercules, and Beta Ray Bill movie, which sounds awesome. I hope it has a little more serious tone to it. You know, the occasional quip is, you know, that's the MCU's thing. But that sounds so cool. Throw Sif in there and you got like a squad of 4. Oh, that's great. That's great. But I also heard that, speaking of Valkyrie, Thor Ragnarok, before they wrote Valkyrie in, Sif was supposed to take Valkyrie's spot in the film. So that was kind of how that was going to go about. Of course, there'd be some situations changed, obviously. But Sif was supposed to be with Thor when he got to, or come find him or something like that. I forget. Whatever the case, Sif was supposed to have a bigger role in Ragnarok, but the actress who plays her had like a scheduling conflict, so she couldn't do it. And so then Valkyrie's smaller part became a much bigger part in Ragnarok. Now, before we tackle Valkyrie, I'm gonna let him give his thoughts first, and then I'll give my thoughts on his thoughts.
Is another powerful warrior of Asgard, who was selected by Odin to lead her own special winged cavalry unit. She has also gone on to be involved in several other non-Asgardian corners of the Marvel Universe, and linked up with a number of major teams during her comic run. She wasn't incredibly popular, but she was a solid C-list entry. When it came to the films, Marvel decided to take her in a different direction, obviously. Instead of an honorable and well-respected warrior, she is portrayed as a drunken buffoon and a slob, who is about as far from an Asgardian as you could get on every level. Tessa Thompson looks like she just got out of bed for most of her scenes, being the most modestly dressed king of the gods you'll ever see, while rarely showing even the slightest of emotions during any given scenario. Her likable attributes are slim to none, so naturally Hulk and Thor are obsessed with her and beg her to be around all the time. As an audience member, Valkyrie's inclusion in this story has felt like a burden that you are now forced to endure if you have any interest in Thor. Thor can no longer be featured in this saga without her being chained to his ankle. Want a Thor-Hulk team-up movie? Too bad. Best we can do is a Thor-Valkyrie team-up with a hint of Hulk. Thor's story is an arc where he learns the value of leadership in preparation for becoming king, or at least at one point it was. But then, Thor suddenly became a pathetic drunkard, who instead will pass the crown to this other pathetic drunkard, one who has spent a large majority of her life away from Asgard. Want a movie centered around Thor and Jane's love story? Not without Valkyrie as an awkward third wheel. Where would that movie be without her wacky jokes? Where Valkyrie was once a nice addition that helped add to the mythos of Asgard, she is now a tumor that slowly kills any film she's involved in. Now some final notes to touch on before we move on from the Asgardian.
Oh, that's right. They made her gay in that one too. I forgot about that. Huh. Well, anyways, I actually like Valkyrie in the third movie. I do think that sometimes she overdid it here and there, but I kind of liked her redemption arc she had in Ragnarok. It was pretty good. You know, could have been better. Sure, she could have been better, but I think it was fine. The issue was when it came to Love and Thunder, and then she just became like this crutch to the story, and I just did not like her in Love and Thunder. Like I said, maybe it's one of those things where like Thor and Valkyrie were so bad in Love and Thunder that I actually liked Jane the most out of all of them. And it's crazy how Love and Thunder even made Korg kind of lame. You know, and Korg was awesome. He was like one of the best characters before that. I think she should just be kind of put as like a cameo thing. Let's bring Sif back into the fold. Let's let her do her story next. I think there could be something cool there. But as far as Valkyrie goes, we can kind of let her do her thing now and move on from her, for sure.
past would be for Hela and the Enchantress. Now, I've spoken in great detail on these characters in the past, so again, check out my previous videos if you haven't already. But TLDR, it is a crime that the MCU has been around for as long as it's been, while completely disregarding one of the most prominent female villains in their library. The MCU leadership claims to be very progressive and pro-woman, yet they seem to not even realize that there are many great female characters that they could utilize, but either simply don't, or when they do, they change the character entirely. Which brings us to Hela. Hela was one of the better villains to emerge from the films, which isn't saying much, because the villains are portrayed horribly in these movies, and like the rest, movie Hela does leave a lot to be desired, as this portrayal strips a lot of the nuance from her comic self. Instead of Thor's sister, Hela was Loki's daughter, and the ruler of the underworld. Her desire is to claim the souls of the dead, and anyone who interferes with that is considered her enemy. Her position would often put her at odds with Marvel's heroes, but sometimes she would be at odds with its villains, and could even be helpful to the side of good. Her unique agenda makes her more of a neutral force, and has made her a more nuanced character as a result. And that added depth would have been nice to see in the films, instead of her simply being static and evil. Plus, she was very big in the comics, and I thought that as a society, we liked big women. So what gives, Kevin?
The big woman's still here?
Now, this is where we're going to stop for today, but trust me, there is plenty more to cover. So please, do like and subscribe to stay up to date, and help this channel prosper. Thanks.
Okay, short note on Hela before we get to the outro. I do think that Hela is, I liked Hela a lot. I actually think she's one of the better villains of the entire MCU. I like the fact that she wasn't just like an angel of death who just wanted to kill everybody. There was actually like a motive behind it all. I dug it. I thought it was pretty good. Still, like I said, I do understand his arguments for why it would be considered weaker. But yeah, as far as this video goes, I agree with a lot of it. I disagree with a lot of it. What did you guys think? What do you think is holding back the MCU female characters? There's a lot of other ones he didn't cover in this video. But what do you guys think of this? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn notifications for more. And if you enjoyed this video, I have a bunch of other videos right here. Just click the link here on the screen and we'll take you there. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you next one. Peace.